Maggie Gyllenhaal is among the most well-known actresses in Hollywood. She comes from a family of filmmakers. She was born on November 16, 1977, in New York City. Her film career is varied and impressive. She gained recognition in the independent film scene after her role in Secretary and received an Academy Award nomination in 2010 for her performance in Crazy Heart. Additionally, she has appeared in major Hollywood blockbusters like The Dark Knight. Maggie comes from a lineage of filmmakers. Roughly 10 years later, during a peak in Jewish immigration to the United States, Maggie Gyllenhaal's great-grandfather, Benjamin Silber, arrived at Ellis Island and settled just a short distance from 68 Mott Street. At the time, the Lower East Side was bustling with industry and employment opportunities were abundant, particularly in the clothing sector. Once Benjamin was finally released from Ellis Island, he found himself alone in an unfamiliar country, surrounded by a foreign language. With no other choice, he had to adapt quickly to survive. His first job was cutting flowers for women's hats, earning just $3 per week. Through determination and persistence, he took on various roles and eventually became a fabric cutter in the women's garment industry. Like many immigrants in his neighborhood, Benjamin Silber's journey to New York had been long and filled with hardships. Benjamin was born in what is now Latvia, but was part of Russia at the time. He grew up in an era and region where being Jewish posed significant challenges. Russia was in a fierce conflict with Japan during this period, leading to an unrelenting demand for soldiers. Benjamin eventually reached the United States in 1906. After spending several years on the Lower East Side, he relocated his wife and daughters to the Bronx, where he established a small family-run business. At a time when few women pursued careers, Maggie's grandmother graduated from medical school and became a highly regarded pediatrician. Naomi recalls that her mother was on call for 18-hour shifts, working alongside her father, who was also employed at the hospital. Ruth Silber made groundbreaking contributions to the medical field. She developed a pioneering method for screening newborns for birth defects, a discovery that gained national recognition. We presented Maggie with her extensive family tree, which spans nearly 1,000 years. As we traced her lineage back in time, we found connections to some of the most significant historical events in Europe. In this instance, we can trace her ancestry all the way back to the First Crusade. We were able to track Maggie's heritage so far into the past because she descends from nobility, including monarchs, earls, and dukes from England, France, and Sweden, dating back to an era before written records. Throughout history, the aristocracy was often among the few who documented their lineage, primarily to establish royal authority and secure inheritance rights. Maggie's fourth great-grandfather, Leonard Gyllenhaal, had a unique passion. He was an avid collector of beetles. While Maggie had some knowledge of her noble Swedish ancestry and her Russian Jewish heritage, there were aspects of her lineage that she had yet to uncover. On her father's side, she also descends from some of the earliest settlers in America. Through her paternal grandmother, her family tree can be traced back to the Pilgrims of New England. One of her ancestors, John Lothrop, was a minister in the Independent Church of London, an underground religious group formed in the early 1600s. At the time, the Church of England held complete control over religious practices, permitting no opposition or alternative faiths. To the established church, Lothrop and his congregation were considered heretics. No longer welcome in England, he and a group of his followers set sail for the New World in 1634. They eventually settled on Cape Cod, where the Lothrop family name remains well known to this day. For John Lothrop, America was not only a refuge for religious freedom, but also a land of opportunity where his descendants could build prosperous lives. Generations later, another of Maggie's immigrant ancestors arrived in America, much like Lothrop, bringing his customs, language, and traditions with him. Despite the cultural obstacles he faced, success was on the horizon. Maggie's third great-grandfather endured immense hardship in his early years, struggling with poverty and illness. However, he eventually relocated to Chicago, where he built a career as a skilled landscape architect. In 1865, he was provided the opportunity to design Lincoln Park, which has since become one of the city's most cherished public spaces. Beyond his professional achievements, another defining aspect of Swain's life was his faith. Swain and his family were devoted followers of a lesser-known Christian denomination called Swedenborgianism, a belief system that had been practiced in his family for generations in Sweden. His grandson, Leonard Gyllenhaal, carried on the family's religious tradition when he moved to Pennsylvania in the 1890s. There, he played a role in establishing a town called Bryn Athyn, located just outside Philadelphia. The founders of Bryn Athyn aimed to create a close-knit community centered around their shared spiritual beliefs. Today, their descendants continue to live in the town, including the home where Maggie's father grew up. Swedenborgianism is rooted in the teachings of Emanuel Swedenborg, an 18th century Swedish scientist and philosopher. Today, approximately 8,000 people in the United States continue to follow this faith. Maggie's grandparents instilled these beliefs in her father, Stephen, raising him in the Swedenborgian tradition. The family remained active in the church community in Bryn Athyn. When Maggie's father, Stephen, left Bryn Athyn and abandoned the Swedenborgian faith, he was breaking away from generations of family traditions. However, his decision also reflected a broader cultural shift that was reshaping American society. During the 1950s and 1960s, the ethnic communities that had defined the nation for centuries began to fragment, leading to profound changes in identity. Old World heritage gradually faded, and people increasingly identified primarily as Americans rather than by their ancestral roots. Maggie is a direct result of this transformation. Her parents' generation saw an unprecedented level of intermarriage and cultural blending, forming new families with unique identities. Maggie also belongs to a historically distinct group, Ashkenazi Jews, whose DNA provides insight into ancient human history. Genetic research has revealed that 40% of Eastern European Jews can trace their maternal lineage back 2,000 to 3,000 years to just 4 women. Time has erased their names and homelands, but their genetic imprint remains intact. Today, approximately 3.5 million Jewish people can trace their ancestry back to one of these 4 maternal ancestors. Tracing Maggie's lineage led us on a journey across Russia, through Europe, and up and down the eastern seaboard. But time and again, the search brought us back to New York City, the place where so many immigrants became American. A century ago, newcomers like Maggie's ancestors, Jewish immigrants from Russia, settled in the city alongside Irish and Italian communities. Today, New York streets are filled with people from Latin America, Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean. The United States welcomes around 1 million legal immigrants each year, a figure that mirrors the number from 1906, the year Maggie's great-grandfather arrived at Ellis Island. Each of these new arrivals continues to shape and redefine what it means to be American.
Eric Stonestreet, the Emmy Award-winning protagonist of the popular sitcom Modern Family. Eric was born in Kansas City, Kansas, and he grew up on a farm. He felt completely out of place, and his aspirations were far more unconventional. He aspired to become a jester in a circus. Eric's identity had established itself by the time he entered high school. He developed a persona known as FSBO the Clown and was consistently performing. He then proceeded to audition for the Ringling Brothers at Barnum and Bailey Clown College, eagerly anticipating their response. In stride, Eric addressed his rejection. He transitioned from clowning to comedy as he relocated from Kansas City to Chicago to Los Angeles. He would ultimately achieve fame on Modern Family by portraying a character who is an amateur clown. Eric recognizes the irony in his circuitous career trajectory. He also recognizes the continuity within it and is certain that, despite the fact that he has long since left his family property, he is still very much a product of his upbringing. Eric Stonestreet was raised in a close-knit family, but he was unaware of his ancestral origins. We commenced with Helen Heath, his maternal grandmother. Helen lived to the age of 97 and spent her final years with Eric's parents in Kansas City, Kansas, a city located just a few miles from her birthplace. Eric's affection for his grandmother is tangible. One individual, Helen's grandfather, significantly influenced her upbringing in Kansas and, in fact, much of her family's experience in America. William Eckert. William was born in the mid-19th century in what is now Germany and received training as a brewer. However, in 1882, at the age of approximately 23, William recognized an opportunity to revolutionize his life and grasped it, embarking on an independent journey to the United States. William arrived in Kansas within 4 years and submitted an application as part of the Preemption Act, a precursor to the Homestead Act that allowed settlers to acquire federal land at a significantly reduced cost. The acquisition of his land was contingent upon one condition. William was obligated to subsist on it. Also, strive to enhance it. Consequently, the brewer transitioned into a cultivator, beginning from the ground up. William was able to acquire 160 acres for a mere $1.25 per acre as a result of his diligent efforts. By the early 20th century, Denny had initiated the process of rearing a family. He and his wife, Anna. Despite their success, William and Anna remained vulnerable, despite the fact that a fellow German immigrant had 7 American-born children. In 1917, the United States declared war on Germany and its ally, Austria, in order to conclude World War I. Suddenly, German Americans were the subject of suspicion. They were obligated to register with the federal government and adhere to a multitude of regulations or risk imprisonment. Eventually, Eric's progenitors were prohibited from shopping in specific locations without authorization. William and Anna would have been justified in their bitterness. During the conflict, the United States government confiscated approximately $500 million value of private property and sent approximately 6,000 Germans to internment camps. However, Eric's ancestors appeared to endure these years of persecution and prejudice without complaint. In fact, William's actions immediately following the conclusion of the conflict indicated that he was feeling quite content in his new residence. He submitted an application to become a citizen. We were interested in acquiring additional information regarding Eric's German heritage. We quickly discovered ourselves in the Middleston Archives, a tiny hamlet located in Bavaria. The birth certificate of Anna, Eric's great-great-grandmother, was located in this location. It demonstrated that Anna was the illegitimate offspring of a domestic girl named Dute Hoot. Subsequently, we discovered that Dia was a component of a more extensive family pattern. We had already introduced Eric Stonestreet to numerous generations of farmers on the maternal lines of his family tree, a journey that commenced with his cherished grandmother, Helen. Moving on to his father's lineage, we began with his paternal grandmother, Louise Kraft, who was equally cherished. Eric is profoundly devoted to the memory of Louise, who had supported his clown career during his childhood. The primary focus of our investigation was Mary Connect, Louise's mother and Eric's great-grandmother. Mary was located in the 1900 census. She resides with her parents on a farm in Miami County, Kansas. We also discovered something else when August and Gertrude connected. August was a dairy farmer who maintained cows and other livestock on his property. Eric is fondly remembered by many of his relatives, and he was quite successful. However, the origins of August were shrouded in mystique. A clue was discovered in the 1885 census. Augustine's birth certificate indicated that he was born in July 1847 in LCH, a small village located in the Alps. His parents were ranchers. Given that we were unable to locate any evidence that they owned their land, it is reasonable to assume that their prospects for advancement were exceedingly restricted. This may have contributed to their son's audacious decision. We had one more story to share with Eric, and this one did not involve farmers. We reached his great-great-grandfather Anton, who was born in Austria and immigrated to the United States in 1881 by following his direct paternal Stonestreet line. Anton was a tailor, and records indicate that he was not born as Stonestreet. The Steingassers were transformed into Stonestreets. In the midst of World War I, a significant number of Americans with names that sounded German opted to anglicize them. The family had been residing in the United States for nearly 40 years by that time, but their origins were thoroughly Austrian in their hometown. We were able to locate records that predate the establishment of the United States. We were approaching the conclusion of my guest's voyage. The paper trace had dissipated in this direction. It was time to unfold his family lineages. His ancestors were now populated with names that he had never heard before. It was a moment of profound emotion for Eric.